rolling now. Lunchbox half hour. I got a new sticker for my lunchbox. I'm always a little late on getting stuff on. Let me see. Oh, that's gonna look good, man. It's a suffering sticker. All right, this is the lunchbox half hour, is where we do the work. And it's the dirty work. We're in the trenches. We're shoveling the dirt. I actually have like a little shovel around here too now, man. We're getting all the good, I don't know, what do we call those things? Props. We're getting all the good props. Woo, woo. Here's the shovel. You could tell. That's a camping shovel. Woo, woo. All right. Anybody want to see the sticker again? There's the sticker. Okay, so today the subject is suffering is like, to build up the suffering muscle suffering is a muscle. To learn to suffer is a muscle. Oh, Jesse loves the sticker. Woo, woo. Thanks, Jesse. All right, so suffering is like a muscle. To learn to suffer is a big deal. That is how you're going to do big things in life, achieve big things, and especially if you're into endurance sports or anything, or anything that you go out of your comfort zone involves suffering, even if that's business, because it's mental suffering. It's in the brain. So, like, the reason I say suffering is like a muscle, to learn to suffer is a muscle. Because I remember the first time I was training for Badwater in Death Valley, and I was doing my heat training, and I went in the sauna, and the sauna was like, I don't know, it was like 185 degrees. I sat in there for 10 minutes, and I thought I was gonna die. I literally thought I was gonna die. I'd never felt that kind of heat before. And I went right out. Like I said, I lasted like 10 minutes and went right out. And the reason I say suffering is like a muscle is because I kept going in that sauna, training for Death Valley. And after, I would say, the second year I was training in that sauna for Death Valley, and it was 184. I got up to 54 minutes and 15 seconds. So the first time I went in, it was 10 minutes that I lasted. After about a year and a half or year and 3/4, I was able to last 54 minutes and 15 seconds. That's a lot more suffering. Woo, woo. I was building up the suffering muscle. Let's see if Jesse has another question. Can you have where suffering became a source of strength for you? Yeah, that's what I'm just talking about, is my suffering muscle for Death Valley. And when I got in Death Valley, I remember I went down there in the beginning before, like my first year down in Death Valley, and you get used to, going out in that heat. I'd been just sitting in the sauna, not moving, and I started moving out there, and I was like, wow, this is way hotter. And I started getting nauseous, and I didn't feel good at all. And so, yeah, you got to bring it to more extremes. That's why when I started doing the cart, I was pulling the cart in Death Valley, I not only went in the sauna, but I also went down 10 days before I was going to do my cart pull in Death Valley. And we went to Laughlin, Nevada, and I'm there, and it's like in the sun, it was like 140, in the sun, and I'm pulling my tire down the street in the middle of the day, the middle of the heat. Me and my buddy Greg were, woo, woo. It was crazy, and people were all shaking their head looking at us, But I had to get used to feeling that heat coming off the pavement and having weight on my back at the same time, so you're moving, you're doing that, you're out there, and it's harder to get to, a cool spot. Like in the sauna, you just got to go for that door, you know what I mean? You go for the door and you're out. But in Death Valley, even in Laughlin, if you're out there pulling your tire by yourself and nobody's around, which we try always have like two of us there, you know. When I first get there, I always pull my tire or walk up and down the strip so I could jump into a casino if I get hot. It's like, hey, man, I just came in to play craps as I'm sweating all over their casino. But anyway, yeah, so I think suffering for sure is a muscle. If you got something you're doing that involves suffering, which almost, you know, there's different kinds of suffering. It could be like you're just afraid to do something, and so you got to build up your courage muscle by doing it over and over and over again. Or like I said, heat training, cold training, man. I usually before I've done Arrowhead in the past, I've been trying to go out there like 10 days, 2 weeks early. One time I went out there 2 months, two times I went out 2 months early to International Falls, Minnesota, the coldest spot in the continental U.S., to get used to that cold. And for 2 weeks it was like below minus 20 or minus 10 or something. It was really cold for like 2 weeks when I was out there that you didn't even want to leave the hotel room because it was so cold. But you just keep doing it and you keep getting used to it and you're building up that suffering muscle, Let me see if there's any. Here's another question. What role does the mindset play in turning suffering into growth? So I think if you get out there and you keep doing it, it gets easier. No matter what, if I keep getting in that sauna, it gets easier. It gets easier. And you're like, when you think you're going to die the first time you're in there, like you literally get pictures of yourself in your brain, like you're in an oven or something, and you're cooking. And that's not a good visualization to have. But anyway, and then you just get used to it and you realize what you can handle. So your mental muscle up there for suffering gets stronger. Same within International Falls. In the beginning, I didn't go anywhere where there wasn't a car near me pulling my tire in the really cold weather. And then after I went there a couple summers, I guess that would be summers for Laughlin, Nevada. I got where I could go out by myself and I knew I could make it back if it was, you know what I mean? If I went out for whatever, couple miles down the road, I'd make it back. I just got more and more confidence, knew what I was doing, had my water with me and just knew what I could handle, So yeah, your suffering muscle gets stronger. Okay. How does suffering connect to courage and never quitting? Suffering is what you need to do to build courage. You know what I mean? You're going to have either mental suffering, physical suffering, mental and physical suffering to start building courage. And if you're not going to build courage in your comfort zone. You're not going to build courage in your comfort zone. And the more you can handle, the more you can suffer, the better your odds, the further you're going to make it in whatever event or race you're going to do, and even possibly finish. Finish because you got a strong suffering muscle. Yeah, I've had some pain when I was in the Grand Canyon. The skin peeled all off my feet on my second to last crossing. I did 7 crossings across the Grand Canyon, like 135 miles, whatever it is. And it was 110 degrees on my last, on the bottom of the canyon, it was like 110 degrees. And you got used to it, you know what I mean? And I had trench foot on the 6th crossing, all the skin on the bottom of my foot frickin' came off. And I just crossed it, with my suffering muscle. I just suffered the rest of the way. What I found that happens if you get really good at suffering, whatever you got that's hurting like hell, it goes numb. That's your goal, is to have whatever's hurting like hell go numb, because then you can keep going. Woo. That's when you know you got a real good suffering muscles. If you can go long enough that whatever you got hurting goes numb. Woo. Okay, let's see what other question do we got? Okay, is there any measure of progress in? I think for me, like I said, in the sauna, it's like how long can you go in the sauna before you have to cry uncle and run out, you know? I mean, that is a suffering muscle. You're getting used to the heat, you're getting relaxed. It's a suffering muscle. By suffering, you learn to get relaxed. You learn to know how far you can push your body, that you're not gonna freaking die, and you build up that suffering muscle. And that's what, you know, so whatever I take on, I'm always trying to build up the suffering muscle for it. Whether it's hot, cold, altitude, you know, rock climbing. You know, I got to get when I'm rock climbing, I got to get out on the steep stuff, and I got to get outside where it's like, you know, you're dealing with stuff, you know, that can really hurt you. Not just, you know, in a climbing gym, everything's pretty safe, but when you get outside, man, everything hurts because it's all like granite and stuff, you know. So, but I think the more you push on, you know, yeah, the more you get used to your suffering, the better you're going to do in life and in these events, you know. Here's another question. What daily habits help prepare you for life's tough moments? I do, you know what I mean? Yeah, daily habits. I mean, it would be like I like doing Wim Hof. I think, you know, by just taking a lot of breaths and practicing pushing your breathing in, pushing your breathing out, you're getting a little bit of stress there when you push it out and hold it for a while, you know. And then so that's a daily thing. I Wim Hof daily, man. Wim Hof daily. Woo woo. And then, but then I'm like in the sauna 5 to 6 days a week. And I'm big about that being a suffering muscle too. And then when I'm swimming in the bay, that's huge suffering muscle. I did, you know, I did an hour, you know, I did 2 4-hour swims this year in under 60 degrees. I did an hour at 50 degrees, which is my record. You know, you get in there and you just accept that you're going to suffer for an hour and you try to relax while you're suffering so the cold doesn't get you so bad. But I get nervous when I'm not strengthening my suffering muscle. It makes me nervous because I think you're either strengthening your suffering muscle or your mental toughness muscle, whatever you want to call it. You're either strengthening it or it's getting weaker. And I really believe that. So you got to stay on it, you know. Like I haven't rock climbed in a little while. It makes me nervous because the next time I go out to rock climb, I'm going to go like, holy cows, this is steep. You know what I mean? It gets you worse, you know. We have 7 people on the line. I think that's our record. Tied for it. Woo, woo. Oh, there, I just got 3 to hang up. How lucky. Okay, only the hardcore are still on. Can small daily discomforts like cold showers? Yes, I take a cold shower every freaking day. I take a cold shower every day. And you get used to it. You just get used to it, man. I get used to it. I'm totally used to it. I don't feel like a warm shower even does anything for me. So yeah, I'm big about whatever you can do to get out of your comfort zone and keep strengthening that suffering muscle, and if you strengthen the suffering muscle, that leads to mental toughness. Look it up, man. It's you can probably Google it. Anyway, but yeah, the more you're out there and you put yourself out of your comfort zone and the more you can suffer. Like I said, I love it, man. I love going to Laughlin and training in that heat, man, and pulling my tire down the street. How much better does it get in life than that? You're like super challenging yourself, super pushing the envelope on suffering. Same within the sauna there, man. It's like, I just love it, man. It's like, I got a joke that I'm in charge of safety in our sauna. You better save 2 steps and a dive for the door when you decide to go out, because I'm in charge of safety. Woo, woo, 2 steps and a dive and you're out the door. Woo, woo. Anyway, okay, how do elite athletes use suffering as part of their training? I think like, well, I'll tell you, I hang around the marathon swimmers and those long swims, they're out there doing, you know, towards the end, they're doing 10-hour swims in San Francisco Bay in the cold, and 10 hours of swimming in the Bay, I don't care who you are, you're going to have some suffering. Woo, woo. South End Power. We're the best at suffering, I think. What do you do every day to increase your VO2 max and prepare? Oh, this is my buddy. Big vertical clouds. My VO2 max. Today I was just doing some speed work running, working on my VO2 max. I'm not that fast yet at running though, but I would say that, and I don't know if Wim Hof helps your VO2 max. It probably doesn't. You probably have to be actually exercising. But if you're doing swimming, you got to do hard intervals. You know what I mean? I didn't feel like this time in my preparation for English Channel that I had enough time to do proper interval training. I just didn't get in good enough shape to really train hard in the pool to where I'm, going into working on my VO2 max. But when I'm running, like right now, what I've been doing is running up the hill. And so even if I'm going slow, you're still building up your oxygen just to go up the hill and up the mountain here, Mount Tam. And I'm getting a little faster and going a little higher every time running up that mountain. And I'm sure all that will help when I start doing my swimming again for my VO2 max. Woo, woo, VO2 max power. Okay, how does suffering help reveal your true character? I think, I can't even hang around people who aren't really mentally tough. I just if I'm going to train with you or do whatever, you got to be, you got to be on it. You got to have good character, as far as mental toughness going, I can't be around people who, it's just, I don't know, I can't be around it. I need people around me who are either really close to as tough as I am, or most of them are freaking tougher. And that's who I like to hang around. The ones that are tougher than me, that get me bringing my suffering up another level, Like in the sauna, there's a couple guys that are beating me now. And I'm like, I think about it all night long. I go, how am I going to beat those guys that's suffering in the sauna? They're freaking, these guys are pretty good at it, So I think you do build character. When you keep suffering, you build up your mental toughness. And those are the guys I like to hang around, the really mentally tough people, man. Because they just, that mental toughness just oozes out of them. And you're like, I don't know, I have a tendency to think if they can suffer, if they can suffer that much, I can suffer that much. Because I'm really competitive, especially at suffering. Okay, what's one practical exercise anyone watching could do to strengthen their suffering muscle today? I think it's like anything you have a fear of, that fear thing, is going after that. But it's like, if you want to build up your suffering muscle and you're not used to taking cold showers, take a freaking cold shower, man, and stay in there for a while too. It's not going to kill you, hopefully. And then, like I said, do the same thing in the sauna. Try and stay a little longer than you normally would. Remember, I'm in charge of safety. 2 steps and a dive for the door. You gotta get out before you're under that level. Anyway, so I think it's things that make you uncomfortable, just going a little bit further and suffer a little bit more and build up that damn suffering muscle. And you might even build up your VO2 max at the same time. What's the link between suffering and resilience? Resilience, man. I think you're not going to have good resilience if you can't suffer, because as soon as you start to suffer, you're going to quit. So you gotta be able to reach in deep. And the more you practice your suffering, you get your suffering muscle going, the deeper you're going to be able to reach in these events that require, big suffering. They require big suffering muscles. And so you got to keep building it up. Like in Arrowhead, when it's like you're in the middle of the night and it's like minus 40 degrees and you're out there pulling your sled and you haven't seen anybody in like 3 hours, and if you screw up real bad, you're going to lose parts possibly. So anyway, yeah, I love that stuff. I love it. That'll be, if you can suffer, you'll build up your resilience. And if you suffer enough, you're probably going to finish. Woo, woo. Okay, how do you use suffering as fuel instead of letting it drain you? I like to think, and I've heard Goggins say this before. Sometimes when you're out there and you're training and you're by yourself and nobody else is out there, you know what I mean? There's something about that builds mental toughness in you. And it doesn't drain you. It makes you feel stronger that you're doing something that nobody else is doing. Or if you're training with a few people and you're doing some really hard swim or something really hard, and really you just know there's not many people who are doing what you're doing or who want to do what you're doing. They're not going to be suffering like that. And so it makes you feel kind of like you got a superpower, the suffering superpower. Woo, woo, but you got to build that suffering one up. That's not born with you, man. You got to build that up in you. How does suffering build or gratitude for simple things? How does suffering build gratitude for simpler things? I think when you get used to suffering, when you got an easy workout, it's freaking easy, man. It's actually easy workouts. Sometimes I have trouble with them because they're boring to me. If I'm not suffering, I'm bored, I'm trying to get over that because I tend to get overtrained. But that is, so yeah, I think a big thing is that suffering, suffering for gratitude for simple things. Yeah, if you suffer, then when you do relax after suffering, go and get something to eat, whatever, get a massage, lay on a nail bed, you're just grateful that you're not suffering anymore and that you've built up your suffering muscle. What happens to someone who never develops their suffering muscle? I don't know. I listened to Jim Rome this one time. It's like, oh, so you don't ever want to, you want just to be comfortable all the time, the whole time and not being in danger in life, not have to face any of your fears. He goes, I could put a pillow in that corner and I'll feed you and bring you water every day and you just stay right in that corner. And the guy, and the guy's like, well, what kind of life is that? Exactly, man. Get out there and push past your boundaries, do some suffering, and have a big freaking life. Woo, woo. All right, I think we're out of time. And so, but thank you guys. You guys are amazing. Suffer on. Woo, woo.